Hello, welcome to Love Lust Betrayal. Subscribe if you like our stories. Let's dive into the story. I had always prided myself on being a good husband. I worked hard to provide for my wife, Lisa, and always made sure she knew how much I loved and appreciated her. We had been together for 8 years, married for 5, and despite the occasional argument or rough patch, I always thought our relationship was solid. We had a good life. Nothing extraordinary, but comfortable and loving. Lisa was beautiful, intelligent, and the woman I had built my life around. We had a close-knit group of friends, and we were always the couple people looked up to. But something had been changing over the last few months. Lisa had become more distant, more preoccupied with work, and her attention was often elsewhere. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was just the stress of her job, or maybe her trying to adjust to some new responsibilities at the office. I didn't want to assume the worst, so I gave her space and tried to be understanding. But then came the birthday party. It was one of those things we'd been planning for months, just a small gathering at our house with a few close friends. But in the days leading up to the event, Lisa seemed increasingly distracted. She was glued to her phone more often than usual, responding to texts with an urgency that seemed out of place. I brushed it off as work-related stress, but deep down, I could feel that something wasn't right. The night of the party, everything seemed to go as planned. Friends arrived, drinks were served, and the atmosphere was light and fun. But something was off. Lisa wasn't quite herself. She was distant, often disappearing into another room to take calls or send messages. Her attention seemed divided, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. It wasn't like her to be so secretive, especially during an event that was supposed to celebrate me. And then he arrived. His name was Daniel, Lisa's boss. I'd met him a few times at work-related events, but we were never close. He was charismatic, charming, and a bit too flirtatious for my liking. I always felt a little uncomfortable around him, but I never thought much of it. After all, Lisa was a professional, and I trusted her. But as the night wore on, I noticed the way they interacted. They seemed to have a connection that went beyond the usual professional dynamic. There was a subtle tension between them, an undercurrent of something unspoken that I couldn't ignore. Lisa laughed a little too easily at his jokes, touched his arm a little too often, and they exchanged glances that spoke volumes. It wasn't long before I realized the truth. Something was going on between them. I tried to stay calm, telling myself I was overthinking things, but as the evening progressed, Lisa and Daniel became more and more engrossed in their own conversation, leaving me alone with our guests. I tried to push the feeling aside and enjoy the party, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing sensation in my gut. As the night wore on, I found myself retreating into the kitchen, trying to avoid the growing tension between Lisa and Daniel. I could hear them laughing in the other room, and every so often their voices would lower to a soft murmur, making it feel like they were sharing secrets. I felt like an outsider in my own home, and it hurt more than I could put into words. It wasn't until later that night, after the last guests had left and we were alone, that Lisa finally confessed. The house was silent. Too silent. The chaotic energy of the birthday party had been replaced by an eerie stillness, and it was as if time had slowed to a crawl. The remnants of the evening were scattered around us, empty wine glasses, half-eaten snacks, and the faint lingering scent of alcohol. It was the kind of stillness that you could almost feel pressing down on your shoulders, heavy and suffocating. Lisa and I sat on opposite sides of the room, the space between us vast and filled with a tension I couldn't ignore. Her face was flushed from the wine, but the unease in her eyes that I had looked into so many times before, was unmistakable. It was as if everything we had built together was crumbling, and she knew it. "Daniel," she began, her voice soft and trembling. "There's something I need to tell you." My stomach sank, and for the first time I felt like I had no control over my own body. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as my mind raced. I had already suspected, but hearing her say it out loud was like a punch to the gut. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though it cracked under the weight of my emotions. My chest felt tight, and I struggled to keep my composure, knowing deep down that whatever was coming next would destroy the world I had known. I've been seeing someone else, she said, barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt, but I saw something else in them, too, fear. Fear of losing me, of having to face the consequences of her actions. It started a few months ago, with Daniel. The name hit me like a freight train, Daniel, her boss. The man I had trusted, the man I had always thought of as a colleague, not a threat. My mind went numb for a second, and I had to force myself to focus on her words. I could hear them, but I couldn't process them. Everything seemed to slow down. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my hands were shaking. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It was as if I was already preparing for the worst, but I couldn't bring myself to truly accept it. About 6 weeks, she said, her voice breaking. Tears welled up in her eyes, and I could see her trying to hold herself together, but she was losing the battle. I didn't mean for it to happen, Mark. I never planned for it. It just happened. About 6 weeks. I repeated, the words leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. You've been seeing him for 6 weeks, and you didn't think to tell me? You didn't think about me? About us? The anger rose inside me like a tidal wave. How could she have been so careless, so selfish? How could she betray me, the man who had given her everything? She reached out, placing a hand on my arm, but I recoiled, pulling away from her touch. It was like I couldn't stand the weight of her guilt, the weight of her betrayal. I couldn't bear to let her comfort me now, not when she had shattered everything we had built together. I'm sorry, she whispered, but the words felt empty, hollow. It was too late for apologies, too late to fix what was broken. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just the physical act of cheating that hurt, it was the emotional betrayal, the lies, the secrets, and the fact that she had chosen him over me, over everything we had. She had picked the attention of a man who didn't care about her the way I did, and in doing so, she destroyed our marriage. Why, Lisa? Why him? I asked, my voice cracking with the rawness of my pain. What did he offer that I didn't? What did he give you that I couldn't? She hung her head, her tears falling freely now. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I wasn't thinking, I felt so empty. You were always working, always tired, and I just wanted to feel something different. I wanted to feel alive again, to feel special. When I was with him, it felt like I mattered. I know it was wrong, I know I made a terrible mistake, but I just couldn't stop. Empty. Empty was how I felt now. Empty was how she had left me. I had been there for her, working long hours to provide a life for us, to give her everything she wanted, and this was how she repaid me. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I couldn't see beyond the betrayal. She had made a choice that had destroyed everything we had worked for, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting moment of excitement. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for that. I stood up abruptly, my chest tight with the overwhelming flood of emotions. I walked toward the window, my hands gripping the frame as I stared out into the night, the dark sky reflecting the chaos inside me. My mind was a whirlwind of hurt and confusion, and I couldn't process it all. Lisa didn't speak for a long time, she just sat there, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I could hear her, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. She didn't deserve comfort, not now, not after what she had done. Finally, I turned back to face her. She looked so broken, so lost, but I couldn't find any sympathy in my heart. Not yet. I don't know if I can forgive you, Lisa, I said, my voice cold. It was the first time I had spoken to her like this in years, so distant, so detached. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. I'll do anything, Mark, she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. I love you. I made a huge mistake. Please don't walk away from us. The desperation in her voice didn't move me. How could it? How could I forgive her when she had chosen someone else over me, over everything we had? It wasn't just the affair. It was the lie, the deceit, the way she had taken my trust and shattered it into a million pieces. I need space, Lisa, I said, my voice cold and steady. I need time to think about what's next. I don't know if I can move past this. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her behind. She didn't follow me. She didn't try to stop me. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that our marriage, whatever it had been, was over. The love I had for her had been replaced with a cold, unfeeling void. And as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I realized something. Lisa would have to live with this for the rest of her life. She would have to live with the regret of betraying me, of throwing away everything we had for a fleeting affair. And that, in the end, was the hardest punishment of all. Thanks for watching, like, comment and subscribe.